Indian Military Review and the Centre for Joint Warfare Studies organised a webinar and virtual expo on digitization and networking in the armed forces on 21 to 24 November 2020. The sessions included communication networks of the Army, Navy and Air Force and interoperability, network-centric warfare and how they are undertaken by each service, C4ISR, including the naval experience, the Army's use of UAVs and beyond visual range operations, decision support systems, particularly communication to weapon systems and identifying friend and foe, information, data and big data challenges including information sharing and managing information overload, space domination and satellites by officers from the Defense Space Agency and DIPAC, and new technologies which included artificial intelligence, 5G and Internet of Things.
Jai Hind, Chief of the Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal R.K. Bhadauria, the General Officer in Chief, RTRAC, General Raj Shukla, Air Marshals Kumaria and Anil Chopra, General Panu, General V.K. Sharma, General SPS Kocher, Colonel Kuber, sailors, soldiers, air warriors, members of the scientific community, industry, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Center for Joint Warfare Studies and General Ravi Arora of Indian Military Review, I welcome you to the third day of this webinar on digitization and networking. Thank you very much all for joining in, and my special thanks to the Chief of the Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal Bhadauria. Sir, you've been always very kind and supportive of Center for Joint Warfare Studies, both as an Air Chief and in your earlier assignment as Vice Chief of the Army Staff. We are really thankful to you for your guidance, support, and directions always. Thank you so very much. We are on the fifth session today. The earlier four sessions, especially the inaugural session on Saturday, we had the Chief of the Defense Staff, we had the CISC, we had the DG, DRDO, and also the Deputy Chief of the Army Staff speaking to us in the inaugural session, which was very educative, and it did lay down the groundwork for the next 2 days of the sessions. We also had 3 additional sessions out there, we had the speakers from all the 3 services, the Army, the Navy, and the Indian Air Force, and also from the scientific community and industry. We also had Mr. Anand Agarwal speaking to us in the inaugural session, giving the industry viewpoint. So aim was to get all the stakeholders together and ensure digitization and absorption of technologies. Some of the points which came up, I will not repeat that, but what actually emerged was, and I'll repeat what I said in the inaugural session, 2020 has been a year of disruptions. We had COVID-19, a major disruptor of the century. Then as far as India is concerned, China has been a major disruptor. I was commissioned in 1974, and we always were told that China is a long-term threat. We also went into what we call the low-level threat, the medium-level threat, and the high-level threat. As a DGMO, we did the transmissions in Dipsang, which was the first of its kind in 2013 after a very long time. And that's the time when we had the Indian Air Force activating the DBO with the C-130 Hercules landing out there. So it was a good effort that time. But 2020 has been different. We see China aggressiveness, aggressive behavior along the LAC. And we have surprised China with our resilient resolve along the LAC and the armed forces preparation, the rapid build-up, and the capability to deploy out there and to demonstrate our strength, because China respects strength. So we have done that, and I must say in that it is the Indian Air Force which has moved everything, and it has been a visible factor which has acted as a deterrence to China's designs along the line of actual control. So the three services are moved together. The others, the domestic support and the BRO especially have pitched in. Of course, the diplomats and others have done their job. But what does it entail for us? At the cost of reputation, it entails that because of COVID-19, the resources limited, and because the China threat which is manifested, we do now face a collaborative threat from China and Pakistan. The so-called two-front war is knocking at our doors. It is not no war, no peace anymore. It is near war and no peace. And we are prepared for it, but we need continuous preparation, and we need to make sure that we are future ready. And for that, we will be, because the COVID-19 resources will be tasked, asked, and expected to do more and more in less and less. And that is where the challenge lies. And that is where I think the technologies, new age technologies, play a very major role in that. We have to ensure that the technologies are not only exploited as force multiplier, but also the force substitutor. In that, I may say that Indian Air Force, we have to learn a lot from them. They have the lead in the technology fields. They have inducted and absorbed technologies faster than others. They're exploiting technologies, and the Air Force could drive the technology absorption and induction for the armed forces. Actually, the armed forces could learn lessons from there and piggyback onto the Indian Air Force. The way they have the structures, the way they have absorbed, that could be the starting point, and they could amalgamate all that and carry forward. I will not take much of our time. I will, without much ado, I would like to Air Marshal R.K.S. Bhaduria to deliver the inaugural address. He needs no introduction. Anyone who's on this forum, I'm sure, is very well aware of his many achievements and contributions to national security. Over to the Air Chief, please.
Thank you, sir. Bhatia, Director St. George, distinguished delegates, senior officers, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning. I must firstly thank you. It's a big privilege for me to be here this morning for the WebEx webinar and virtual exhibition on the subject, digitization and networking in the armed forces. I must personally thank General Bhatia, Director, for inviting me to be a part of this webinar and share my views with such a distinguished audience on a very important issue today, domination of the aerospace domain in the Indian context. And I think you have laid the groundwork very well, and some of the issues that you have just identified and talked about and mentioned about the Air Force and the need of the hour to be strong. Like you said, China respects strength, and I must start with that. We are strong, but we need to look at the realities. We need to look at how technology is moving. We need to identify areas that we need to move forward and really take this domination to the next level. We have the ability to dominate today at the time of choosing, but the definition of domination, the definition of the extent, and everything concerned around operations is rapidly moving. And therefore, I think the single most important thing would be the issue that is being discussed now: networking, digitization, ability to shorten the loop, whatever, in whichever way you put it. But this is the most important issue, and I really appreciate St. George for putting this on the table, getting the experts, and start to discuss it. While many of the issues, I will not be able to go into the depths of it, where we are and what all we have done. But at the organizational, at the top level, I would cover these issues as far as Air Force is concerned, as far as our scenario is concerned, and what we need to do regarding this. And like I mentioned, since the central theme of the webinar and the discussions have been on digitization. I will share with you IF's experience on building potent network-centric warfare capability and the way forward in achieving enhanced domination of the airspace. I'm glad you mentioned some of the things already. I think all three of us, all three services have moved a lot in the last decade in this. Two things most important. Firstly, we need to integrate much more. And secondly, we need to move forward with times. This scenario in digitization is changing so rapidly. Our basic structures in our procurement decision making are the way we integrate, the time we take, how the industry moves, how we ourselves move. All this needs to be looked at. And I'm sure the concerned specialists who are attending, including the industry people, will look at these issues. We can't have open-ended timelines. We need to move fast, absorb. And while it is being absorbed, look at the next level straight away. There is no time to think that this will sort out for the next decade. What you implement today will be good for the next 2 to 3 years. You should already be moving to the next level. So that is the background with which I'd like to start. Aerospace domination really implies being able to rapidly and accurately engage all targets, whether mobile or static, in the air, on land, over the sea, in chosen time space. To achieve this capability, integration of all available airborne platforms, ground-based weapon systems, and decision grid in particular is essential. And I think the decision grid is something that we tend to miss out or not implement in its full capability and capacity. We are well aware that the process of transforming a linear decision-making process into a well-integrated information and knowledge-based networks is the essence, basic essence of digitization in terms of the direction it should take in the armed forces. Infusion of information technology at the turn of the century ushered a revolution in the military affairs. We all know that. And that went into fundamentally alter the nature of warfighting. Now, network-centric capability seamlessly fuses all elements of warfighting to create a very high level of shared battle space awareness that can be and should be effectively exploited to dominate the operations in that area at that time. The key components of this capability are the sensors such as radar, ISR platforms, AWACS, satellites, etc. The shooters, both manned and unmanned, and the decision makers in the loop who control the air battle at all levels. And all levels means starting from tactical, starting from individual level in the cockpit or the combat system, right up to the formation to backwards to decision makers on ground. I have recognized early enough that this synergy is critical to reduce the sensor to shooter time, or what we call compressing the OODA, observe, orient, decide and act cycle. And this is really the essence as far as our ability to dominate is concerned. In air war, it would apply simultaneously in parallel layers. Like I mentioned briefly, the pilot in the cockpit who's handling the threats or the target, to the formation in parallel, the formation leader taking decisions, to the entire area in which the air battle manager would be taking parallel decisions, going backwards to command or commands whose assets are deployed in that air war that is going on in that area. Okay, to the extent that between commands and air headquarters in parallel, seamless thinking and decision making in terms of real-time results and how that particular battle changes the scenario of the next one or the parallel one in the adjacent area. So the whole scheme of things need to move fast, and that whoever can do that better would win the situation. As you are all aware, air power application is not only time sensitive, but inherently escalatory in nature, particularly in no war, no peace scenario or sort of conflict scenario. And that is something, again, which needs to be kept in mind. All this mandates a high level of visibility into battle space to enable commanders to take quick and accurate decisions that will ensure that the campaign achieves the desired effects. It is for this reason that air operations in particular We plan following the concept of centralized planning and decentralized execution. That is the way we work. And our current network capability already enables us to plan and execute air operations across the commands from maybe one location or two locations in parallel. We can today conduct operations, for example, from Delhi across many commands, assets into one area, chosen area, or the desired area. And it need not be Delhi. The same thing can be done from a location somewhere else. And that is the greatest flexibility and capability that digitization and networking brings, provided we set it and integrate it and get it into our operational systems and thinking correctly. Complete visibility into plans accords a very high degree of flexibility at the operational level to also effect dynamic changes to shape the air battle. Thus, real-time decision-making such as rerouting fighter aircraft to destroy an alternative target or a more important target, or dynamic switching of roles of force levels in air to cater to any emerging enemy air threat is a norm even today rather than an exception. And this needs to become the high point of our ability in network-centric operations in the future. With aerospace sector being highly tech-intensive, IF has been on the path of digital transformations towards NCW capability for over a decade, I think decade and a half. And General Bhatia mentioned some of the issues that we have progressed well. The process protocol started way back in 2006 when Pan-India multi-protocol label switching optical network with modern IP-based technology was came into being. And based on this, AFNet, the network backbone of the Indian Air Force, was founded, which provided us an ultra-high-speed communication and real-time data sharing capability. So what we started then has fructified today Pan-India, and that has been the kind of development and initial integration cycle. But having gone through once, what we need to do now is our ability to modify it, to upgrade it at a pace which has to be much faster. The success and lessons of the AFNet project laid the base for the next evolution step, which involved integration and networking of our sensors, progress towards processing capabilities, and keeping the IT infrastructure abreast of concurrent advances. This has been achieved by integrating all our sensors for early warning, like I mentioned, AWACS, long-range radars, including civil and other services radars, aerostats that we already have, and satellites for time being in COM domain, but later on we need to think of other means, which empowers the Air Force to dominate an area, firstly in information in the required area, and thereafter with the assets. The evolution of ISECS, the Integrated Air Command and Control System, which is a C4I element, has really resulted in a seamless airspace surveillance capability across the length and breadth even now. Now, AI and automation have shortened the sensor to shooter loop, making targeting highly responsive as another layer on top of this. And this is AI-based systems and other advancements is something that we need to look at, which will make dynamic targeting, which is already a reality today, to be even more faster, and decision-making in particular even more sharper. Combat planning and automation system is being developed in-house by IF, which will integrate air campaign planning and execution, including war gaming. And this is something that we have launched this year, which will again pave the way for really being networked. Such initiatives in operations are the only way to automate the battlefield functions of tactical echelons and then establish an integrated combat management system. Concurrently, we have also been actively partnering with industry to expand our digitization and automation footprint across multiple domains, which indirectly enhance our capability to undertake operations. A leading IT firm has developed for IAF an electronic maintenance management system. My guys call it leading IT firm, but I must say that it is Wipro, and it's been successful. Of course, you all know ISCCS we have done with Bell. And EMMS, which I talked about, has now become one of the world's largest maintenance monitoring system with complete digital workflow across all platforms of the IAF. This has already fructified today. So this is the pace at which we have moved. Likewise, and all this with the indigenous industry, fortunately, it was good of our predecessors to have taken this call, because that is the only way you can keep the information secure and have the ability to make amends and modifications. Likewise, our e-governance projects, which are undertaken now, will achieve enhanced automation and paperless workflow by this year end. That's our target. And on nearly all operational, administrative, and maintenance related activities of the IAF, PAN-IAF. Tri-services integration is the next logical step in this evolution of information-centric warfare. Individual service-specific C4I systems are already in place. We need to construct joint and integrated C4I systems. Convergence of tactical data system, which automates the process of situational awareness information across the entire battle space, is a key requirement. One of the challenges in such integration is the development of information islands within each service with robust security mechanism. And this is important because the moment you digitize, your vulnerability on security front needs to be really tackled. And we can share a lot on this in terms of our own experiences with sister services. These information islands can be overlaid on a common tri-service grid and serve to provide the requisite data without causing information overload. To this end, the NFS is one such medium of convergence while we strive to have tri-service network capability. While IAF has made considerable strides in its quest for dominating the information networking domain, I would like to dwell on a few lessons also we have learned in our journey. They're just the important ones. First and foremost is the fact that frequent software and hardware changes have a negative impact on the transformation efforts. And the hardware changes fast. So we really have to be a little visionary in this process, that what we choose and how fast we do. Also, we need to formulate a process that harmonizes requirements across disjoint individual weapon systems. Integrating systems such as EW or common debrief platforms, which we have just done recently, have led us to reverse engineer systems due to incompatibility with extent security procedures and requirements. So this is one of the major lessons in the recent past, which we really had to solve. This would increase when we try to integrate legacy or stovepipe systems. Policies and process of digitization or automation must lead to balance in developing systems that leverage the latest and best technology, while having systems that are stable and combat ready. Second major lesson is in the area of software development lifecycle itself. I already mentioned that this is an area that needs to move fast. And I think the strength is that if we are indigenous, it will be our biggest strength to move faster. The industry also needs to recognize this and have a shorter loop in terms of their own decision and implementation, and have a little more open-minded approach towards the security requirements of the service. With the operational urgency to develop a digitized product, we invariably employ the standard spiral model, which you are all aware. This has resulted in faster fielding of software, but comes with a new set of problems. To provide users with software equipment with critical points, developers are forced to often release software before perfection and then continually field upgrades. And this we have seen on many projects. At times, it's also for cost cutting, which is just too bad. And these are the issues that the industry needs to handle. A better approach would be to decide on what we call software drops, so that unwanted features are identified mutually and culled out of the development cycle. In the cyber domain, though we have moved towards the cyber agency, DSA, and service-specific cyber groups, we still need to walk a good distance ahead to achieve all our operational objectives. And a lot of work has started in this area too. As military communications, sensing, logistics, and maintenance and C2 are increasingly digitized and interconnected, cyber defense has become a vital element of enhancing the digital resilience of our forces and network. Our aerospace systems and informatics systems are increasingly intertwined, and hence the potential for cyber attack is huge. More importantly, the potential of damage or real-time damage for whatever is on at that time is huge. For example, the Conflicker bomb attack on French in 2009, you all know, most of you will know, led to short-term grounding of the Rafale fleet. If this happens at the wrong time, it could be critical. This is a scenario that needs to be avoided at all costs. Most of our systems are moving ahead, and we are invested towards technological advancements such as software-defined networking, artificial intelligence, and let me tell you, Air Force is doing a lot in AI in many of our systems, especially integration and shortening the time frame of analysis. Managed and big data analytics, again, a lot of application, particularly in the field of huge data like EW. There are emerging technologies like quantum computing, which we need to carefully look at. Some of you may be aware that Google is already claiming to build a 53-bit computer, quantum computer, to accomplish a task in 200 seconds that the fastest supercomputer summit today would take 10,000 years. So this is what we are talking about in the years to come. While quantum computing is still in the nascent stage with respect to military application, we must see this technology both as an enabler and a disruptor in the near future. And let me tell you, since China was mentioned as one of the areas that we need to look at, the amount of technology, amount of investments being done in this field is huge. And I think this is an area as a nation that we need to look into. Given the pace of advancement in these emergent technologies, we just cannot afford to be left behind. And I think we can only be at a comfortable pace if there is a national effort in all this. So the industry really has to look at the future carefully, and we need to leapfrog to catch up in a lot of fields as far as our networking and ability to employ it, to be able to dominate where we want at the time we want. Finally, before I conclude, while digitization is the need of the hour, any lasting solution must envision beyond basic network connectivity and cyber security. Okay, that is just the basic, absolute basic, like I mentioned earlier. Also, defense planners need to maintain a backup analog or appropriate systems in order to ensure minimum operational capacity in case of digital blackouts or EM disruptions, or disruptions due to cyber attack at the wrong time. And I think this is a very critical area. We shouldn't forget that whatever networking we go on to, there has to be a fallback option, which is quite operational. It should not happen that we depend on network so much that the lack of network, our fallback operations, disrupts our ability to dominate. And if we are not careful, it can easily happen. So this is an area which needs good attention, and we are doing a lot towards it. It's in this aspect that we need to enable our leaders to have a deep understanding of the warfare in the context of the information age. Manning digitized environments presents a major challenge in the military ecosystem, as we are forced to compete with private sector for qualified young men and women. We are still not self-reliant in terms of IT infrastructure, with hardware being dominated by China and OS being dominated by US, broadly speaking. However, we can offset the same by efficient programming, coding, development of algorithms, and this is an area that should become a strength, apart from taking some long-term look and calls on the issues of software and hardware towards our application itself, both I think in the industrial domain and the military domain in particular. This is in one area that can propel us into an area of network domination in the future if we take many of the actions that I talked about. I am confident that the constructive discussions and deliberations that are taking place in this webinar and virtual expo will contribute in enhancing the digitization and networking in the armed forces, and further our goal to achieve a potent network-centric capability across all domains of warfighting. My best wishes to all the participants for a successful conclave, and my thanks to Director Centrons again for inviting me and giving me a chance to interact with you and share some of the views. Thank you very much. Wish you all the best, and Jai Hind.
Thank you to the Chief. Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your experiences of the Indian Air Force on the network centricity. Actually, you also spoke on network domination. Thank you very much indeed. You have given us the guidelines for the day's discussions on, and a number of implementable, pragmatic solutions have already been given by the Air Chief, and we will carry this forward. Some of the things which I think we need to really, this is quantum computing, and that is something we need to really bite into, and we'll have to look at the quantum computing in a big way. We should not lag behind, because new technologies will dictate not only military power but a national power. It will contribute to comprehensive national power. Geotechnology is exceedingly important. So we'll have to look at quantum computing and hyper technologies. The Air Chief also spoke of trial services integration and the need of the trial service integration to be more and more. And also something which was very interesting was the centralized planning and decentralized execution. And that also forms the key of network centricity. There are a number of points, and the best one was, I think, the human intelligence. The pilot really has to be now. The control is technologies cannot do everything. The human intelligence and the pilots will have to exploit these technologies, and that is where the challenges will also come in. Thank you very much, sir. It's been very educative just listening to you, me personally, and I'm sure all the participants have benefited from this. Thank you very much. Grateful to you. I now request Colonel Kuber, and I don't need to introduce Colonel Kuber. He is well known in the military circles as also industry circles and also the scientific community. Over to you, Colonel Kuber.
Thank you, sir. Air Chief Marshal R.K.S. Bhadauria, the Chief of the Indian Air Force, General Bhatia, sir, General Arora, sir, respected generals, serving officers, ladies and gentlemen. I extend my deep thanks to IMR and St. Joe's for choosing Ernst & Young as a strategic partner for such wonderful seminars and allowing us to create a knowledge paper around this. We are very grateful for this strategic partnership. I was very happy when the Chief of the Air Staff mentioned about our procurement timelines and how we need to really adjust them to suit the requirements of future warfare. Before I begin the industry perspective, I want to extend my grateful thanks to General Madhav Datar, who's been my commander of the EW Brigade, and I served under him, and I commanded an EW battalion later. And what we used to pick up, let's say in our program, from one location was actually relevant to a location far further south, and it was a few 100 kilometers away. And the question was, how do you integrate this communication in such a way that this type of information is available in real time? And we were actually struggling at that time to integrate the communication, the non-communication intelligence that was coming across, because we also had some capabilities which are really untold, but they are real capabilities. And we used to actually, once aircraft takes off from Sargodha, we would actually know that it is taken off from there. So there are certain things that we had, and we wanted to see that. I also extend my grateful thanks to Jayant Damodar Patil of L&T, because I wanted to have a very clear industry perspective on how industry is coping to this digitization before I come here, and I'm going to talk about that. I want to begin this talk with the letter that the commanding officer of an infantry battalion wrote post-Kargil to the Chief of the Army Staff. And he said, "Sir, I've got all the communication equipment that I need, all the communication equipment that I may want. I've got 4 different radio sets, 4 different types of radio sets here, and they are in abundance. None of them are compatible. I'm not able to speak. I cannot fight a war like this. So this is this is a very simple example. Even integration at a lower, at an intra level, we have not been able to handle. I don't know what happened after this letter, but this was a letter. This was a very famous letter written by a CEO post Kargil. Kargil, there was another very interesting incident, another thing to talk about, which was the mismatch between the Jaguars and the Mirages on the grid system. And all this was because there was no integration. We lacked that integration at the levels that it was required to be. So I would like you to imagine a scenario. And we all know that Rafales are flying across Ladakh. So let me say an LCA is flying over a particular area or a slope. And within 60 minutes of its flight, it has gathered such a lot of information, and it's got all sorts of data. And the company commander below, who's actually the one who may be affected by the information that it has actually picked up, how does he get access to this data without waiting for a one-to-one communication with the aircraft? So if that data could reside in a place that gives common access, and you can imagine the number of sensors, and you can imagine the ubiquitousness of these sensors, and they're all over the battlefield. Synthesize that, and you get rich data, and data, when converted to information, will be of tremendous value, and access can be made, can take place to that particular data one way or the other. And that company commander could probably have access to an information which he so very much requires. Otherwise, it's going to trickle down to him, after about a couple of months. And I've seen many of these SITREPs which used to come, and by then the entire thing was over. Many times, like the Air Chief also mentioned, many times bandwidth may be limited. We may not have access all the time. We may actually be denied of bandwidth. So we need to differentiate between real-time information versus near real-time information versus time-shared information. And I think when we are able to distinguish this, we'll be able to better design our networks. There may be opportunities, there may be chances that we might go in the dark and may be denied the entire net for some time, like the submarines operate. When you come back, all that you need to do is to download, adjust your algorithms, adjust your data, balance with cloud computing and computing alongside the edge. So edge-side computing and cloud computing, along with adjusting of the algorithms, will play a very key role in actually determining as to what type of information that you may have. And these are the technologies that we need to ride upon and develop. Jointness, to my mind, is only an attitude. It is what role do I see for others in the game that I'm playing right now? And as the CDS mentioned yesterday, control over technologies, and he would hold the advantage. We have seen this entire thing between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and some of us who have followed Azerbaijan and Armenia over the years, it was Armenia that was dominating Azerbaijan due to technology at some point in time. And Azerbaijan took control over technology, took control over the resources, and the tanks and the bunkers that were there with Armenia were picked up by a non-human element. It was picked up by a few drones, and therefore that was the differentiator in the war. And this is where I would like to draw an example to the Turkish industry, Turkish defense industry, how they have grown. In spite of being an ally of the US, and when they were denied a particular drone, the MQ-9 or something at some point in time, they started developing on their own. And today, even Pakistan holds the Bakhtiar drone of Turkey, and these drones have been effectively used against Armenia. Role of the private sector is something that we need to really define, redefine, and redefine, because private sector has been out of the loop for more than about 7 decades, and they were brought in, and still we don't see a level playing field. I'll just give a very small example. The exports from 16-17 that India had were 15-21 crores. In 17-18, it was 4,682 crores. The contribution of the private industry in 16-17 was just 194 crores. In 17-18, out of the 4,862 crores, the contribution of the private industry rose to 3,163 crores. While the contribution of the DPSUs more or less remained stagnant around 13 to 1,400 crores and actually reduced to 932 crores in 1920, the private industry grew up to 7,387 crores out of the total 8,300 crores of exports that India has done. And ladies and gentlemen, the latest figures are out of 9,115 crores of exports that the Indian defense industry is doing, the private sector does 8,007 crores, while the DPSUs and the ordnance factories put together do only a meager 904 crores. And therefore, there's a case to look at the private industry in a more detailed manner. And this is when I want to talk about it, because I don't want to give the details of NASSCOM and the technological advancements that our companies have done. But I want to bring about one very important point. Though we shouted off from rooftops about the transformative nature of digital technology engulfing us, it was only COVID-19 and the onset of the pandemic we realized the full might of it. Life is digital by default. Today, we have attended marriages on this platform. We have done everything on this platform. We have saved so much of cost. What did not happen the last